This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Allison Cook, Lindsay Trebet, and Super Inframan. If you'd like to help support the show, you can do so at wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? Tonight I have with me Mr. Timothy Renner.
Hello, everybody.
And a ghost who will say nothing in the background. However, if you hear the ghost say something, let us know.
A typing ghost.
A typing ghost? Huh. That's an interesting ghost. What does it type?
Commands for a video game, I think, presently. But
Oh, no. I was talking about the one that sometimes leaves EVPs in the show.
Oh, okay.
All right. So we're going to do some listener stories, because not only did I get a bunch of listener stories, but I realized sometimes people don't send them to the stories folder, and then they really get lost. And I was cleaning up email last week, and it was like, oh, look, more listener stories. So, yeah, so now I have a few, but please keep sending them to stories at wheredidtheroadgo.com, because that is the very best place you can send them, and hopefully I'll sort of keep up with them now. Anyway, this is actually a very recent one, coming from the 5th of this month, April. And he says, I just heard my stories on the previous Where Did the Road Go? And so he decided to send a few more out that go along with some Native American spirituality events from when he was in college. So he says, I'll start with the odd ones. Twice in my life, during times of sickness, I've had phantom entities visit me. They happened at separate times and in different locations, so I don't believe they're tied to a place, but instead to me. The first, that I can recall, happened during an overnight campout in high school. On this property, there was a small old farmhouse that consisted of a kitchen, dining room, and family room, and an open floor plan on the second floor. No indoor plumbing. It was that old. On the second floor, there were some beds that had been set up by the Boy Scouts who occasionally used this house for campouts. As the evening progressed, I began to get a rather severe migraine. The owner of the property let me use one of the beds to lie down. It was nice and dark and on the second floor, which helped the migraine quite a bit. I buried under a pillow. The person walked over to the bed, sat down on the edge, and remained there silently for a moment. After some time, they stood up and walked back down the stairs. After I awoke later that evening, the migraine had passed. I returned to the group on the first floor, thanking the owner for letting me use one of the beds, and asked him who it was that came up to check on me. I wanted to thank them as well. He just looked at me blankly and replied, no one went up there. I specifically told them not to, even though there were several people that wanted to check on you. I grew up in an old farmhouse, so I know that they can shift and make noise throughout the evening hours when the building expands and contracts from the day's weather. The sounds of footfalls climbing a set of stairs is very different. Beyond that, I had felt the bed shift as a solid form sat on the edge and recoil as they stood up. I've had this happen a second time as well. This was 4 to 5 years later in an entirely different location. I was just crawling into the bed with the flu, turned out the lights and closed my eyes when I felt the edge of the bed recess from a form sitting down. Without opening my eyes, I said aloud, not now, I'm too sick to deal with this. The form seemed to stand up and leave. In that same room, I also recall playing video games one night with my back to the bed. I audibly heard the creaking of someone crawling into the bed, and when I turned around to look, I could see the edge of the bed visibly recessed. I shrugged and assumed that whoever it was just wanted to watch me play games. In this instance, I didn't hear them leave, but when I looked back, the recess was gone, so I know they were no longer there. I've had this experience.
I've talked to several people on the show who have had very similar, if not the same experience, but I myself have never experienced that.
Yeah, I've had, and even down to actually it was the last sleep paralysis experience I had when that thing, like, I felt it drop on the bed behind me. I wasn't even like fully asleep, so I don't know if it's right to call it sleep paralysis. I think I was sort of in between. And I asked it if my dad hid money in the house, and then told it to go away because it wasn't helping. But but that's the thing. Like you feel the bed just sink in, and it's like, okay. When I first decided I was going to write a book on my experiences, like 5 years ago or so. You see how well that went. It is in progress though. Very slow progress. Every day, sort of from the moment I made that decision, I said, okay, I'm going to do this. Like every night when I turned off the lights, I would hear someone walk into the room, walk over to the edge of the bed and stop. And then I'd turn on the light, there'd be no one there. And I eventually just said, yes, I know not to put everything in the book. And then it stopped.
Really?
Yeah. Because
that was kind of weird.
Well, that was the feeling I was getting from it. Like, it was kind of like being critical of me. And I'm like, I know not to print everything.
So, I mean, I guess if you're not going to print it, you're not going to talk about it. But can you tell the nature of the things you're not going to put in the book?
Some of it's just very personal stuff.
Okay.
I mean, there are things I've interacted with in very strange ways that I know I'm not supposed to talk about. Like I knew when it happened. It's like, okay, this is one of those things I can never talk about.
Gotcha.
Most of the stuff will end up in the book, but there's just a handful of very personal things where it's like, okay, I'm not going to write about this. I'm not going to talk about it. We'll keep it, and some of it will end up in there very vaguely. It just won't be in detail.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, I mean, and I get it all the time with the feeling of cats jumping on my bed. That's also stopped since that last sleep paralysis incident.
Interesting.
And they were getting to the point where one night I felt a cat jump right into my feet, like with a physical thump into my feet. And I'm like, okay, that was a real cat. And I turned on the light and there's no cat. And I'm like, all right.
Yeah, again, I've gotten the cat stories before as well.
Yeah, the cat stories don't seem that uncommon.
Yeah, I think it's a thing for sure.
So do you get any stories about the sound of something moving when people are trying to sleep?
Do you mean other than like people hearing recognizable things like footsteps or something like that?
Yeah, so what I hear every once in a while, and the fact is that like if it did it all the time, I'd assume it's something in the room. But every once in a while, I'll hear this very slight sound of like cloth moving on cloth.
And
it's very distinct. And I'm just like, what is that? Like there's, and it happens so infrequently that it's not like it can't just be, okay, I have a fan on and it's moving something. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I feel like somebody's told me something like that, but I'm at this point, 170 episodes we're closing in on, I guess. Soon it'll be 170. I guess we just passed 160. So sometimes things blur.
Yeah,
I'll have
just a
people
bit.
to say, remember that one episode? And it's like, yes, but I can't tell you whether it was number 30 or 140. I don't.
And I've occasionally had people ask me, hey, I heard this guest on your show, and I'll be going, I don't know who that is. And every once in a while they'll be like, I'm sorry, it was actually this podcast. I'm like, oh, thank you. Okay, good.
Oh, I've had that too, where people have insisted, like, this person's been on your show before, and I'm like, no, I don't really think so. I mean, I really don't think they've come on. Like, no, and then this will go on in a comment section, and then eventually it'll come around to like, no, they were on this podcast, and
right,
yeah,
that makes me feel better because I realize, okay, I didn't actually forget someone.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's what as I said, with these interviews kind of blurring together, sometimes my fear is that I will publish one twice. So when someone says that, I'm like, what? No, I don't think so.
Well, yeah, even reading these stories, because a lot of times I read them when they come in, and then I'll go through them and be like, wait, yeah, I try to mark them. I try to mark them when the email is done, so I know we read them. But sometimes I forget. I just don't do it. And so I'm like, so I think we read this one on the air.
Right, yeah.
And we have like 50 listener stories shows, so I can't just go back through them all.
Yeah, you never even numbered your episodes, so
no,
they just go back to when you started.
Well, that's because I came from a point of doing it on radio.
Yeah, exactly.
Not as a podcast. The podcast was a secondary thought, like, oh, I can also podcast this.
Exactly.
And when on radio, you don't number things like that. You just put the date on them.
Right.
So that's hence why mine are dated and not numbered. So Cherylee wants to join us.
All right.
So let's bring Cherylee in.
Hi there.
And this is we've only read one so far of a 3-part story, which is not directly connected, but 3 different experiences from the same person. So this is the second one. The property where I had my migraine ghost incident is also reported to be haunted. What surprised me, though, and several others who were with me, was the light phenomena that we encountered on a different campout. We had gone for an evening hike around dusk and were returning to the farmhouse after sundown. It was a full moon, or at least close enough to one that we could easily see, and we were walking along a fence line that overlooked a massive field. We were all joking about how the place was haunted when we noticed a few lights appear at the wood line across the field. The wood line was about 300 yards across the field from where we were. These lights did not blink, so they could not have been fireflies, but they also moved at an even speed. They remained level and traveled in a straight line along the forest's edge. I don't recall exactly how many there were, but I remember at least 3. Once they reached the edge of the field, they blinked out. The first thing I did was start thinking of logical explanations. This area was known for four-wheelers, but there was no sound, which would have been noticeable across the field. As lights did not blink, so fireflies were not a possibility. They traveled in a straight line at a steady pace, but at a speed much too quick for a person to move on foot, not to mention there would be slight bobbing if it were a flashlight. They didn't seem to flare or arc in their paths, so they could not be fireworks, especially since they were too slow to be a bottle rocket or Roman candle. The lights were white, so that eliminated laser pointers. And finally, there was nothing reflective that could have created this effect from one of our own flashlights, which we weren't using anyway. The incident had me truly stumped, and to this day, all I can say is they were will-o-wisps because I have no idea what else to call them.
Does not surprise me at all. You're getting light phenomena on a haunted property as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen that type of stuff before, and you know it's distinctly different from anything that you could put an explanation on. Mm-hmm. The one graveyard up in Ithaca, I've got that type of light phenomenon. It moves very steadily across. It doesn't cast a beam. It's just like a glowing orb moving very steady and slowly, but not like somebody would be walking or anything like that. Any other thoughts?
No, unless it was somebody with lights on their cell phone, but you'd see people.
Yeah. Plus, the lights on the cell phone would be bobbing.
That's true. And people are noisy out in the woods. You always hear them.
And the fact that it's along the woods also isn't surprising.
No, not at all.
All right, he says, the last of my stories involves my time with an intertribal native spirituality organization that I belonged to when I was in college. About once a month, we would get together, camp out, and have a ceremony or celebration of some kind. Occasionally, they would have sweat lodges. After participating in a sweat lodge of my own, I was asked to be a firekeeper for subsequent sweats. My job was to maintain the fire outside the lodge where the stones were heated. As the ceremony progressed, I would pass these hot stones into the lodge for the participants. The way the surrounding area was blessed, the lodge and the firekeeper's pit were all part of a larger sacred circle, making the firekeeper part of the spiritual process, even though they weren't inside the lodge itself. The first sweat where I was a firekeeper was for a women's sweat. They all entered the lodge wearing nothing but large bath towels. As the ceremony progressed, I could hear them chanting and talking inside the lodge, but could not understand the exact words they were saying. About halfway through, I began to hear the jiggling of bells, which are common in a powwow dancing. I assumed that some of the ladies had taken bells in with them, since several of them were members of a drum circle, and bells are often used by members who are not actively drumming. It wasn't until after the sweat was finished and everyone dressed and was sitting around the campfire that I learned that no one had been chanting inside the lodge and no one had taken bells in with them. They had heard the same thing and assumed it was I that was chanting outside and playing with the bells. The next time I was the firekeeper, it was for a men's sweat. Again, the blessed circle enclosed the fire pit, so I was part of the ceremony from the outside. This one was held during the day in the woods, so we were under cover of a canopy. It was extremely peaceful, and as I was sitting there enjoying the afternoon while I tended the fire, time progressed and I began to hear the sounds from the underbrush. A box turtle was slowly making its way toward me. This was fun, considering they are rare in my area due to timbering. I then heard further noise. A second turtle crawled from the brush, then a third, then a fourth. When it was all said and done, 8 different box turtles had made an appearance, each coming to the edge of the circle before retreating to the woods. I'm not sure the significance of box turtles in the local native cultures, but those who participated in the sweat said that they were for me specifically. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that story. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's turtles all the way down.
Yeah, that's both parts of that are really interesting. That they were both hearing the chanting and the bells ringing.
Oh yeah.
And then the turtles. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And the fact that they came right up to the circle but didn't enter it is also interesting.
Yeah.
Years ago, I was doing a ritual in the middle of a field out back, nothing around for miles. And I was making a decent amount of noise while I did this ritual, but I cast a circle around me. And so I get done and I break the circle and it's pitch black out. And suddenly I hear this hiss. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And I dive and grab the light, which was sitting outside the circle, and I turn it on and there's a deer there. And I'm like, why would this deer have walked right up to me? Like it was just outside the circle, and it's almost like it didn't notice me until I broke the circle.
Maybe it didn't.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things I wondered.
Yeah.
Unless
So
you had like an apple in your pocket or something.
No. But man, did that scare the crap out of me.
Because I had a deer follow me around one day, and I realized why it was following me around. It's because I had an apple in my pocket.
That makes sense.
So I gave it to the deer.
I had 7 or 8 turkey vultures on my property yesterday, which seems like a large number of turkey vultures. I don't know what they normally are in, but normally I only see like 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah, you don't want them hanging out.
Oh, they like to live in the creepy barn.
Mm.
This is not a new thing.
Okay.
I'm fine with it. They don't bother anything.
That's good.
But they're enormous.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But it's like, I walked out and I wanted to get a picture of one because it was sitting on the ground. And I'm like, I grabbed my good camera and I went out to take a picture and immediately took off. And then a couple more flew in, and then a couple more flew in. And I'm going, oh my God, how many are there? And I'm like, there's like 8 turkey vultures, flying above my house right now.
You know their defense mechanism if you get too close, right?
No, what's that?
They vomit on you.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that's effective.
Yeah, so basically they're vomiting rotten meat on you. It's unpleasant. Well, I've never had it happen, thankfully, but I've heard it's very, very unpleasant.
I think that's a safe assumption.
Yeah. I don't think you have to experience that to know the unpleasantness.
I don't want that to happen, I'm pretty sure. Just a guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that would be top 10 fun things to do while on sequester.
Hey, look, it's turkey vulture vomit. All right.
Which I think Vulture Vomit is one of the bands that's playing on Last Exit. Isn't it?
It should be. That is a great grindcore name.
Yes.
All right. So when is this story from? Oh, this one's also from this month. See how good I am at this? All right. And he says that, okay, he has two stories regarding disappearing people. The first was in the winter of 2010 or 2011. I was working as a contract security guard at the Air National Guard base, and it was a weekend evening. To set the scene, the base would virtually shut down after normal business hours, and it must have been between 8 and 9 p.m., so the place was virtually abandoned, and the entry and exit gates were closed. I was at the main gate, which overlooked a reasonably busy road and was seated looking forwards, but there were entry doors on either side of the guard shack, with a window on either side of the door and one in the door itself, and on the north side of the building was a floodlight which illuminated the outbound drive, and this could be seen reflected from the inside of the window overlooking the road to the west. It was in this reflection I saw what appeared to be an airman in an ACU camouflage coat and trousers, wearing a sage green beanie, walk across the outbound driveway. I thought the person resembled someone I knew, and I thought it strange that they would be walking there because there were 12 to 16 inches of snow off of the driveway. Following the trajectory of the person, I thought I saw they would have been walking in an open field. I opened the door to investigate, and not only was there nobody there, but there were no footprints in the snow. I don't know if that's a missing persons one as much as just sort of like a ghostly encounter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, either fits, perhaps.
The second occasion was the fall of 2018. I was working in an office building that has some history. I'd rather not say where it is, but the building is 14 stories tall and is a former sanitarium and hospital. It has towers at either end. I was working in the northeast tower, and the opposite southwest tower had a kitchenette with fridge, sink, microwave, etc. I was walking toward the kitchenette, which was about 75 yards away, and I saw a lady. She had a black blouse and pants, dark curly hair, and glasses. She crossed the opening of the doorway, as one would if they went from the fridge to the sink in this room. I grumbled to myself because I thought I would have to share the sink. However, when I crossed the threshold, there was nobody there. This room only had one way in or out, and I did not lose sight of the door after seeing this woman inside. Lately, the past year or so, I've been seeing fleeting shadow people or something. Last fall, I saw a large black blur dart between my deck and the fence that could have been confused for my 150-pound black Mastiff Dane mix, but for the fact that the invisible fence closes this area to him. And twice this week, walking him after dark, I have seen people that were there, then after passing with a tree to break visual contact, they weren't. Thoughts?
That's interesting that all these things are kind of showing up. I'm wondering if other people are seeing them when he's there too. Sometimes there are people that kind of set these things off, not just for themselves, but for other people too. And I'm kind of curious if he's one of those.
Well, I mean, it sounds like he was alone on all of these. So maybe not. And that's the thing, when you're alone, you don't have anyone to back it up that there was or wasn't someone there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts, Tim?
No, I mean, it's, just neat stories. I've heard similar stories. People have told me similar stories about disappearing people. I'm not sure one person with that many encounters I've had, but I've had people who've had, very similar stories.
So this is a follow-up. This was actually from a YouTube comment of the last listener stories show we did. And they said, yes, I used to see a white dot of light in the corner of my eye, even as my ex started to. It would actually sometimes grow, and then it would happen to us at the same time, and we'd both look at each other. When it first happened, we were laying down watching TV, and we were talking, and it seemed like either it wanted attention or like a portal was opening up, and that's the feeling we both got. It would happen once a week for about a month or two. Now I see it right in front of me when I start to think or picture something. I also see purple hazes or blue-like headlights hit a camera. Is filming a scene where lights or headlights shine toward the camera in a movie. I think I understand what that means. So the purple haze or a blue-like haze, like you get when a headlight shine at the screen, yeah.
Oh, like lens flare?
Yeah, sort of.
Okay.
So, I mean, Tim, do you remember the story about the light in the last listener stories?
I don't. I'm actually getting confused with somebody I know who was on my show who had very similar stories about he and his fiance seeing, just lights appear in the room with them.
Really? That's interesting, too. Anything light related, I'm fascinated with.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's because it's the one thing that just reaches across the whole spectrum of paranormal phenomena. You get lights with everything.
Yeah. And turtles, apparently.
Last hike I did on Toad Road, I found a box turtle shell, and about 5 steps later, looked over and there was a big stump, but it looked exactly like a Galapagos turtle, like a giant turtle on this island in the middle of the creek out there. it looked like a sculpture, like somebody had carved it like that, but it was just the angle. As soon as you change the angle, it looked like a stump.
Huh. All right.
So I thought it was going to be a turtle day, but it was not. People can hear what kind of day it was if they listen to my most recent Toad Road episode. I think it was 157, 158, something like that. 159. 159. So 159.
It's one of those. It might have been 200. All right. Still have this cough from what might have been COVID, but
the antivirus software I have on my computer will protect me, though, right?
Yes, you'll be fine. Unless it's
over my mic.
Unless it's McAfee. Is it McAfee?
No, it's
okay.
I got a Mac. I don't need it a fee.
Oh, that was awful.
Even Allison in the background is just like, oh, that was bad.
All right. This one is from the end of last month. And he says, I had a recent series of events occur and thought this might interest you. I work in a small shop, and we all joke about the place being haunted since from time to time people would hear odd sounds when they were alone after closing up. In the week before Valentine's Day this year, it was an extremely stressful time in my life. Then one night, the assistant manager was closing up, and she claimed she heard a voice say her name from outside the closed office door, despite being the only one in the building. More strangely, she claimed it was my voice that she heard, and she knew I had left hours prior and had no reason to come back. She checked the cameras and confirmed that she was alone. The next night, it was my turn to close. Again, everyone had left, and I was alone in the building. I was in the front of the shop finishing up when I turned around to see a fully formed figure stand up from a crouching position and vanish as they did so. There was enough detail that I could see the clothes that they were wearing, and their color. The figure had tan pants, a yellow shirt, a brown jacket, a wide-brimmed hat, and I was surprised and kind of stared for a second before brushing it off. Prior to this, I had been experiencing a series of hallucinations that I had been writing off as stress-related. I was in my car one night, and when I turned to grab something out of the back seat, I could have sworn I saw a face ducked down behind my car. I was in my driveway, and I only have one neighbor who was not the face I saw. I checked, and nobody was there. Another night, I was walking to my mailbox, and for a second, thought I saw a very thin, almost stick figure dart out from behind the mailbox, run halfway across the driveway, and vanish. I didn't think much of these things, but this hallucination at work was more vivid than the others I had before. The next afternoon, when I came into work after my sighting, I was talking to one of the first shift employees who said they saw a man standing in the store when they were opening and indicated the same spot I had seen them, describing the same figure. This was weird, as I hadn't told anyone that I had seen anything weird yet. The same employee, a couple nights later, heard the distinct sound of a locker slamming in the break room when nobody should have been back there. She checked, nobody was there, and they would have had to walk past her to get to the break room anyway. Besides this, another employee came to find me in the middle of a shift to say they could have sworn they heard me say their name, but I know I was on the other side of the store from them and they would not have been able to hear me. After Valentine's Day, I took a trip to see a sick relative that I had been stressing out over. But since that trip, nothing had... let me try to say that again. But since that trip, nothing has really happened at work. While I could write it all off as hallucinations and hysteria, I can't help but wonder if the sheer amount of stress I had been under before the trip was leaving psychic energy in the workplace that was affecting the people around me. Either way, it was an interesting week of weirdness. And that kind of makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, he may have been manifesting, some poltergeist activity in his workplace because he was stressed out, and, emotion and stress can create poltergeists.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's also that thing about how it's almost like if you're connecting to something else, it seems to try and imitate you to communicate back. I just keep thinking of, was it Timothy? Was it on your podcast where there was the voice that says either back to me or back this way or something like that?
Yeah. That was the Toad Road episode I was speaking of. Yeah.
Yeah. and it sounds like you saying it, but it's not you.
It was not me. Yeah. And curiously, like some of the other sounds I heard before, even as I'm listening to the recording, I thought it sounded like Chad, who was hiking with me, and it was not him. I mean, you just have to believe me. Like the speech patterns, I know his speech patterns, and as I'm editing, I could tell it wasn't him where it came from, but it almost sounded like him. Yeah.
Now, did you hear it when you were walking, or only on the recording?
We were hearing things, but not it. What we thought we were hearing did not sound like what was coming up on the recording. Like we thought we were hearing like mumbling kind of sounds, and what we got was different from that. It was almost like gurgles and stuff. It was weird.
But there are distinct words on the recording.
In one spot, we got an EVP, which is different than the other sounds we were recording, which sounds like it's like just someone whispering right directly into the microphone, and it sounds like it says back that way or back this way or something like that.
And that seems fitting to the area. Like, I don't know, like that phrase seems like it would fit with you and the stuff you've written about this area.
Yeah, well, the thing that really, blew me away is finding 2 pig skulls, and I have a story about, a much earlier story from 1908 about people who were butchering pigs along there, and the guy dropped a revolver out of his pocket and got killed, and one of the pig skulls had a small caliber hole right in the forehead, so, was it a revolver? I don't know. Was it these same skulls? I don't know. But it's just weird finding them. And then it was Chad who, after the episode, said, those like weird kind of growls and grunts and gurgles. He's like, they almost sound pig-like to me. And I was like, this whole like, oh, that puts a new angle on it.
Huh.
Now, was it those particular pigs and that particular? I don't know. But is it the other, in a sense, knowing that I would be reactive to that combination of things?
Yeah.
Two pig skulls, whether they were the skulls or not, but 2 pig skulls in that area, and these other sounds and so forth. Big question. I'll never know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Wait.
I was going to say, I always find it interesting how we perceive some of these things isn't necessarily how it shows up in our technology.
Yeah.
Like I've often seen strange lights when I've walked in our local woods, and I've taken pictures, and I'll get weird things on the pictures, but it never looks like what I see. And I've always been interested in the fact that something shows up, but it's something different, and same with a lot of the, the electronic voice phenomena. It's not necessarily what you think you hear. Like, is it your voice or is it the other fellow's voice it sounds like,
Right.
Yeah, the mimicry and stuff like that is especially creepy, I think.
It certainly can be. I mean, especially when it comes to like calling children's names and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's where it's like, whoa, that's just creepy.
And is it meant to be creepy, or is that all it's just mimicking, like a parrot?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
well, and if you were trying to talk to somebody whose language you might not know, would you try and imitate them?
Like meowing back at a cat?
Yeah. We used to have a crow in this neighborhood that would meow at the dogs to annoy them.
that's amazing.
And actually I would recognize this crow because it would sometimes follow me out to the park when I'd go for a walk there. And I knew it was him because like how many crows meow.
Right. Well, wow. They're actually very good at teaching behaviors to other crows. So, if there was some purpose to it, maybe he taught another crow how to meow.
No, because he had a wicked laugh. After he'd meow and you'd look, he'd start laughing.
That's amazing. I love crows. I love them.
All right. Let's see. This one was a short one from about a year ago. And they say, he says, just heard your broadcast about strange light phenomena. I have seen some strange lights of late upstairs in my house. First one was around 3 to 4 a.m. at night in my bedroom. Curtains were closed across the window, and yet there was a very bright white light in the corner of the room, about a few feet in size. It more or less woke me up, but I was so tired I immediately fell back to sleep. The next time was a couple of months ago, around 10 p.m. or so. I glanced sideways and saw a very bright light at the landing of the stairs. It was only a section of silver because I was in a section sliver because I was in the kitchen downstairs making coffee and could not see what was going on. I paid no attention to it. I just said, here we go again. I don't know how to explain it. The only circumstantial facts that I keep some of my belongings from my late mother upstairs. The other is that I keep a 1637 AD silver chalice, which was owned by a well-known Irish bishop who used to wear a sackcloth as a matter of routine. He was a Thomas a Becket type figure. I don't wish to name him as it might bring unwanted attention. If I see the lights again, I'll let you know. It could be going on all the time, but I would not be seeing it downstairs. And that's a good question. Like, how much of this stuff manifests when people aren't around?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, if I had to bet, I mean, again, no way to know. But if I had to bet, I'd say almost none, because I think it's meant for us in some way.
Yeah.
But
just like the turtles.
Yeah.
They were meant for him.
Yeah. Oh, they were. Yeah, I think so.
Although some people do set up cameras and get things occurring, but then I figure, well, it's because they know the camera's there.
Right. Well, it's the quantum observation thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's right. As long as there's an observer, you've got something happening.
Yeah. So I guess it doesn't matter if the observer is a camera or not.
Right. Or does it matter only when you look at the footage? I mean, that gets, pretty woo, but...
Yeah.
Well, but that taps into our notions of how time works.
Mm-hmm.
Cherylee, you probably know, and I think we actually talked about this recently, the studies where, if the kids studied for the test after the test, they did better on the test.
Yeah, Daryl Bems. Yeah. His research, yeah.
My daughter's within earshot. She's never going to study again. Thanks.
No, but she has to study afterwards before she gets the results. That's the key.
Oh, okay.
And it's funny because I used to do really well in university, and I would always, after a test, go and look through the textbook to try and, second guess how well I did on the test. And I'm wondering, maybe that actually helped me out.
Yeah, maybe. It's I don't even know how he would have come up with the idea for that study. Like, what made him think that,
I don't know. I mean, actually, no, I do know. He took a study that has been done time and time again, like basically seeing how well students do after they study for a test. Like, he basically just took a really commonly used study that there's tons of work published on, and then reversed it so that he had something to compare it to. I think that was the idea.
Okay, but still, like, just to think that way about it is fantastic. Did he do that one in Cornell too?
I believe so.
Yeah. See, I missed all this, and I don't think he's there anymore, is he?
I think he's still professor emeritus. No, not positive, but.
Someone told me he wasn't in Cornell anymore.
Oh, that could be.
I should look it up, because if he's in Cornell, maybe I could just get him to come into studio and we could talk about all this stuff.
Yeah.
He's definitely done some interesting sci experiments. I mean, not that we couldn't ask him to come on Skype too, but it's cooler if he's right there in studio.
Yeah, and I mean, his ideas, like, he's very good at getting published. That was sort of his thing, is that he's a well-published psychologist, and he designed everything specifically so that it would get through peer review.
How so?
Well, like by basing it on studies that have been done before, and changing one factor in them, basically reversing them.
Right. But I would think just the nature of it would get it like peer review would like to shun it.
Well, but see, that was the thing. He got that published in a mainstream psychological journal. Like that, it wasn't published in a parapsychology journal. It was published in a mainstream journal, and that was apparently his forte, because he's very, very well published. in his own field. So.
So he does. He's not just a parapsychologist; he's a psychologist.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a professor. I think he's written several textbooks.
Okay. All right. Yeah, he's someone I definitely need to look into more. His stuff is very interesting. All right. This one says, I'm not sure if this is a paranormal story or not, but it was definitely odd in your recent listener stories show. Where you and Tim were wondering if there were paranormal emails, made me want to share it. I'll preface this by saying that the names and places are changed to protect privacy. About 7 years ago, I had a small YouTube channel making videos on the paranormal. On one of those videos, I received a comment saying, "Nice taste of music, Gray." The two odd things about this is whoever this was knew my name, and the name of the account messaging me was Indrid Cold. At the time, I wasn't super concerned, as I had shared my name a few times with some people on some forums and assumed it was one of them, so I asked if they were from one of those websites. About a day later, I got a private message from the same Indrid Cold account. Unfortunately, I don't remember the exact words he sent me, and I didn't think to take a screenshot, but the message was something like, "The fire has extinguished, but the embers still burn. Your friend John likes the Saskatchewan River," the river that runs through where I live. This is the part that freaked me out, as I have never given the names of anyone I knew, nor told anyone where I lived, so I can't think of a way that they could have known these things. To make things even weirder, my friend had gone to the river to go fishing the previous day. I had a strong feeling not to reply to them, and I've never heard anything from them since, and unfortunately the messages were lost over some update on YouTube, so I don't have them anymore, which is why I can't remember parts of the message. Again, I don't know if this is anything paranormal, but I've never had an explanation to what this was and thought that it might at least be interesting. And it is. That is interesting.
It is. Very much so.
And creepy.
Yes, it's definitely creepy. I mean, I guess it's not impossible. I mean, maybe it's someone who knew him just messing with him.
Yeah, I mean, there's always that and even possibly even a probability, but odd still.
I would think he would be in a better position to know if he had friends who would do something like that, though.
Yeah, and why stop? Usually someone will continue until they can get a laugh,
Right. And then, oh, no, it was just me.
Right, yeah, exactly.
You fell for it.
Yeah, or it's a hacker or something.
Yeah, but the information about his friend going to the river. Yeah. I mean, maybe it was he said something about the river knowing where he was and was a lucky guess, or maybe it didn't quite say that and he just remembers it that way. It's hard to say because he doesn't have the original messages.
The choice of Indrid Cold as a name is of course interesting as well.
True.
Yeah.
He said the names were changed, so I don't know if that name was changed.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, okay.
So he didn't specify. I mean, I assume his friend's name John was changed.
Right. Yeah, gotcha.
So maybe that was, and maybe not.
Yeah, but people post so much on things like Facebook that it's just, whenever anything seems like a bit of a privacy issue, I always want to blame Facebook.
Fair enough. And that's why you don't put everything out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of people who came up with social networking they showed, bits where cops would watch when people were posting, hey, going out of town for a week. And they'd be like, all right, so there's probably going to be some crime here,
Yeah.
Because they realized the criminals in that area were watching for the same thing.
Yes. Well, and also, I mean, there's people who will pretend to be one of your friends. Like my husband just had somebody try and friend all of his friends with a fake picture of himself, like another fake account. And he noticed it right away and alerted Facebook that got rid of it. But, I've had so many of my friends who, whenever I see somebody that with the same name pop up and wanting to refriend me, I'm so suspicious now.
So you said that just as this popped up. from a friend of mine that said, "You didn't get a new friend request from me, did you? I was getting weird text messages and Googled it and suggested maybe someone was messing with my Facebook account."
Gee.
Like literally just this moment that came in. And that does happen. I mean, people duplicate Facebook accounts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they haven't hacked the account. That's the thing. Like I've had customers call me and they've been like, "I think someone hacked me." And they'll tell me, "Oh, they're getting friend requests from me, but it's not me." I'm like, "They didn't hack you. They just took your info and replicated your account, And it's very hard. I mean, you can get Facebook to take it down, but it's hard, because it's not a matter of just changing your email or changing your password. That's like when someone could send spam out from your email address. They don't have to know your password or anything. They can just use that as the return address. And, you'll get all these sudden, this email failed. And you're going, "What's going on?" "Oh, someone's sending spam out from my address." Great,
Yeah, I think Facebook is starting to crack down on that a bit, though, that if you put a complaint in, because the one with my husband, that was dealt with really fast. And I think they just check to see if it's a confirmed account or whatever, because that's why they want your cell phone.
Oh, yeah.
So they can prove it's really you.
Well, I would think the older account would be the one that gets validated.
Well, there'd be that too. Yeah, one would hope. But, but you never know. I mean, look at Wikipedia. They come up with all kinds of fake things, and you could be, there could be an article about you on Wikipedia, and you can correct it, and there's like, no, you're not allowed to correct it. No. Only somebody who doesn't have anything to do with you is allowed to touch this article.
Yeah. Yeah, no source for this. I am the person. I am the source for this.
Yeah. I know so many people who make jokes about their fake wiki information.
There was who was it? There was someone I knew who they were trying to put up information on Wikipedia. There was just like an entry and there was no info. And as they were trying to put info up, it's going, "Well, this needs to be verified," and they're looking into it. And verification means like it has to be on a website or something. And they're like, "So basically, I have to start my own website, put this info on it, and then I can refer to it, and Wikipedia will accept it."
Yeah. Not only that, but did you know Wikipedia has little edit bots that fight with each other and have had long-standing feuds?
Really?
Yeah, AI feuds between little wiki bots.
What are they feud about? Like, what are they trying to edit?
Oh, I have to go back to the original article. I haven't got it in front of me, but I was just recently reading it. It's hilarious. They feud about things like, are we human? Do you think we could be human? I don't know. Are we human?
Oh, so they're not editing back and forth.
Oh, they do that too. Yeah, they do that too. They have philosophical discussions apparently though too, and then they fight and they just keep changing things back and forth and get angrier and angrier about it.
Okay, that's interesting and a little creepy.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to a night terror one. This one's fairly recent. It was sent to me in 2016, so that's only 4 years ago. This is one of the ones that was in the contact email as opposed to the stories at wheredidtheroadgo.com. And I had started it and just I overlooked it after that, unfortunately. So if you want to send me a story, please do. We totally love getting stories that we can read on the air. And even if you don't want to read it on the air, if you just want some feedback, that's fine too. But send them to stories at wheredidtheroadgo.com because that way they're in one place and I can find them semi-easily, usually. Anyway. So they said, forgive me for wanting to share my experience with you, although the topic involved was discussed by you and your guests a long time ago. But when I heard you asking for listener stories, I wanted to share my horrific morning with someone who would not laugh, tell me I was dreaming, or look at me as if I should be put in a mental institution. So apparently this was from a long time ago, back in 2016, which now isn't even a longer time ago. I'm guessing they're talking about the Nightmare series we did on sleep paralysis and stuff. And I have no concept of when that was. I did tell my husband at the time of the occurrence, but he told me that I was obviously dreaming, had fallen back asleep, and was losing it. As a result, I never shared this with anyone, but it has literally haunted me for 15 years. To set the scene, we lived at a time in a bungalow, very long house with a master bedroom at the end of a 30-foot hall. You got into the hall from the kitchen, and there was a small utility room off of the kitchen that led to the back door and then into the farmyard. We had a fairly large farm at the time with cattle, sheep, and horses. We also had a beautiful German Shepherd dog that lived in her kennel at the back door. The dog didn't like being indoors at all, but it was her routine to come in every so often to check up on things. She was very territorial and fiercely loyal, and each morning, as soon as my husband would unlock the back door, the dog would come in, check out the kitchen, check up the hall, check on me in the bed, nuzzling my hand and making sure I was okay, then head out again to accompany my husband while he went to check on the livestock and feed the horses. This particular winter's morning, it has been snowing all night, my husband got up to feed the horses. We chatted when we first woke, and as usual, he said he would be back in half an hour after feeding the horses with my usual cup of tea before I had to get up. I was wide awake and actually thinking of getting up as I listened to my husband go down the hall, open the kitchen door, put his boots and coat on, and unlock the back door. I sat up in bed. I heard my dog coming up the hall. My first thought was that I'll kill my husband for leaving the back door open and letting the dog into the house, as she would be wet, snowy, very messy, and I envisioned, man, I love words. Envisioned her destroying the walls with her sloppy tail and coat, and I would have to mop up all our carpets. For whatever reason, in an instant, I was overcome with absolute freezing terror. Now, I'm a Scottish woman who doesn't get frightened too easily, but for some reason, I was petrified. I got back into the bed, threw the duvet over me, and lay very still with a childlike reasoning that if I couldn't be seen, I'd be safe. The dog's footsteps got nearer, and then it was in the room, and with a leap bounded onto the bed, straight onto my chest. Now, our German Shepherd dog was 6 stone weight. We don't know what that is in pounds, nor do I. And although I was trying to analyze the situation in my very core, I knew it was not our dog. The whole breath was squeezed out of me, and I immediately became paralyzed. Although I knew that I could open my eyes, but I also knew that if I saw what was on top of me, I would be doomed. The feeling was and is indescribable. Terror, fear to my very being, knowing that an evil presence was with me, and I was totally helpless. After what seemed like an eternity, squeezing my eyes tightly shut, I tried to move my fingers or my toes, but to no avail. The stench was that of a very wet dog, but more so. Not a smell, but more of a rotting stench, proving even more to my bombarded brain that it was definitely not my loving dog. In my brain, trying to be logical, I went back to my Catholic childhood and tried to pray, but as try as I might, no prayers, invocation, or saints' names would come into my mind. As anyone that was brought up in any kind of religious setting would know that these things are second nature and ingrained into our brains from day one. After it seemed like an hour, I managed to say in my head, "Please, Jesus, help me," and I mentally thought the first couple lines of the Our Father. At that, the thing lifted its weight off of me. I heard it jump onto the floor and then walk as slowly as it entered the room, its paws padding back down the hall into the kitchen. Then it was gone. I lay there, not daring to open my eyes for several minutes. At last, I heard my husband return, put on the kettle, all the usual morning routine. He came up with a cup of tea and he said, "The hell's wrong with you? Are you feeling okay?" "No," I said, not now that the dog has been in the house destroying everything with her wet coat." "Well," he said, "the dog never left my side from the minute I opened the door. She came up the yard and stayed with me by my side for the last half hour." I, of course, already knew, but I was shaking inside with the experience, knowing I had to be careful about how I told my partner what had happened, knowing he would scoff at me. I was terrified for months after, and every so often I still wonder if this will ever happen again. It hasn't, and I have no wish for it to ever happen again. I can't prove this, of course, but I know that it did happen. The evil I felt was palpable. I really knew the presence of evil and felt the weight, smelt the smell, and knew my goodness, soul, spirit was being sucked from me if I let it. that she says, sorry to bother you, but it was good to at least put this into words. And obviously, it's not a bother for us. I mean, this is an interesting account. What do you two make of it?
Well, first off, thank you for sharing your story. It wasn't a bother. And it almost seems like it's like a nightmare that came to life, doesn't it?
Yeah. But it has that notion of, I mean, first of all, she wasn't asleep, and it sort of followed the routine of the dog, but then something like went awry.
Right.
Yeah, but she was in that kind of hypnagogic spot, maybe, like when you're just waking up.
Possibly.
And that notion of something sitting on your chest is just,
Yeah, old hag.
Yeah, that's something that's in so many of these accounts.
That is true. Yeah, I mean, and of course you have the religious aspect making it go away, but I think that has more to do with deep-seated belief.
Right. Yeah, we've talked about that before.
Yeah.
And it's not, I always make sure to say it's, because I think people get very passionate about it because they believe it confirms their religion in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the fact that, people of all different religions have had success praying in their own way, then it seems like there's probably a belief component less than it trying to confirm or deny anyone's belief.
Fair
religious
enough.
Belief, that is. And I would maybe go so far to say is perhaps, no one knows, I don't know, but I've had the thought that perhaps it's not allowed to confirm one religion or another for whatever reason.
Mm. Well, I think too that we do create part of our reality. It may be a consensus reality that we all share, but we do have an influence over it. So I think belief, just like a placebo, belief does, have an effect. It doesn't matter if the thing you're believing in is real or not, because it's real to you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Any other thoughts on this one?
It kind of reminds me of a story that happened to my husband and myself. Only ours was kind of a happy story. Well, for me, it wasn't for him, but it was for me. And it was a time I really wanted a dog. I wanted one so badly, and he gave me all the reasons why it was a bad idea. That we couldn't travel, that it was a lot of work. Just, the dogs are expensive. We don't have the time to spend with the dog. And I really wanted a dog. I didn't care. And I had seen this dog when I was out on my walk, a beautiful, like a Malamute or something, a huge dog. And it was a puppy, and I petted it. And I kept thinking, oh, I would just love a dog like this. I really wish we could have a dog. And that night, when I had gone to sleep, and I was dreaming about dogs, and I was dreaming about my walk in the park and that dog, and my husband started yelling, and I woke up and I could just kind of see the glimmers of it, but he was sure that there was this big dog jumping on our bed. And as soon as he woke me up, he said it was kind of like that's when it disappeared. And I swear it was like the dog from my dream and the dog that I had seen in the park that day. And it was just, my thought was it was just because I really wanted a dog, and that was it was such a focus at the time, And of course, eventually he did give in. I have a dog now, but
I've seen that dog.
Yeah,
in pictures and dressed up and.
Yeah, I know. He's our baby. But that's what it reminds me of, because my husband was just kind of in that in between, like just kind of not quite asleep, not quite awake state, and I was asleep. And he was absolutely positive that this big dog had jumped on the bed, and he was starting to yell because he thought, how did this dog get in our house,
Right, yeah. Huh. I think you've told me that one before, but I'm not 100% certain.
I probably have. But, like, for me, that wasn't a scary thing. It scared my husband.
Right.
Because, But it's like sometimes when you're just in that kind of right state of consciousness, things can happen.
Yeah, it's that liminal period.
Yeah.
Liminality is all around us. I think what a liminal period of society we're in right now.
I know. We've been talking about that. It just feels so, I don't know, charged in a way.
Yeah. Aren't people seeing a lot more lights and things, like unusual lights in the sky and things right now?
I don't know. I haven't heard that much one way or the other.
Mind you, everything seems weird. I mean, I saw a plane in the sky yesterday and it was like, look, what is that light? My husband's like, of course, I couldn't see it very well at first because it's through the trees. And then my husband goes, it's a small plane. And of course he can look at it and tell you what kind exactly it is, which I couldn't do. But yeah, it just seems so weird. Like, oh my God, there's still planes that fly. Because it's so quiet in the skies now.
Yeah, and I thought, for some reason, I thought they had shut off all travel by air, and then I found out, oh no, the airports are still open, and they're not even really checking people when they come through. So great, okay.
Yeah.
But I actually expected more weirdness than we're getting, honestly, in this time period.
Yeah, because people are having some time to be quiet.
Yeah, and they're also stressing out, and that's putting more energy out there.
Yeah. Now maybe they're all spending it in front of Netflix eating. I don't know.
Hey, they could be playing video games.
Oh, there's that too. Yeah, and eating. Yeah, I know. We're all going to gain weight.
All right. So this one's okay. Let's go into this one. I skimmed it. So this one came from a year ago, and again went into the contact address rather than the stories. So it kind of got lost there, even though I had started it to follow it up. And this is, he says, hello again, sir. Hope this finds you well. I'm not sure if you recall, but you read a story I'd sent you in your January listener stories show. That would have been January 2019. It was the one about a friend's magical experiments leading to poltergeist-like shutting off of all the electric appliances in the room we were talking in. I do remember that story. Huh. Imagine that. I remembered something. I'd like to say that it was incredibly amusing to have him used as a cautionary tale and share the episode with him, along with some good-natured teasing. This is as much a question as a personal story. I've listened to your show a lot more frequently since you read that story, and have been in the habit of putting them on in the background while doing other junk. Though I frequently sympathetically recognize similarities to events discussed on the show with many of my own experiences over the years, there was one unique thing you mentioned which I haven't been able to push out of my head, though it may seem innocuous. Though unfortunately I can't remember which show you mentioned it on. It mirrored something personal, which I've never heard from anyone else. You said that you attracted paranormal people. And that's sort of true. I mean, I think especially now because I'm doing this show, but I especially attract people who have active kundalini, who may have no interest in the paranormal or anything else. They just seem to find me. So that might have been what I was talking about, but I may have phrased it that way as well. You see, I always had this sort of preoccupation with the paranormal, metaphysical, or the spiritual, of which I'm sure you're used to hearing about from people, but I've never had a lot of first-hand perception to the paranormal. Late in life, I came to realize that it was due to a blockage connected with lifelong depression and anxiety, which caused numerous health problems over the years, not to mention often wrought hell with my personal life, but which I barely understood the extent of until the last year or so, when I treated it with microdoses of LSD, which had a profound positive effects on many levels. As a matter of fact, that topic is rather fascinating itself and could probably fill a letter or two, but I'm really trying hard not to go into any unnecessary tangents. The point is, my early life seemed, though it really wasn't, rather dry and devoid of any personal high strangeness, despite my best attempts to produce and experience such. But for all my life, every woman I have ended up being close to or that I had a strong mutual attraction with, or largely that I ended up being personally significant in my life, had tons of the stuff. It was the weirdest thing, seriously. It got to be a bit of a joke when I got to a certain closeness with a lady. I'd wait for the shoe to drop for them to mention their weirdness. Now, these were generally normally looking women, not decked out in witchy goth attire or sporting pentagrams around their necks. It was seldom, if ever, mundane. There was seldom, if any, mundane clue that one could say I sought out in these people, and many situations I chose but ended up with randomly. And the examples aren't minor. My mother and one aunt that I was close to had dreams, but my sister and aunt who I was never close with didn't, for example. The sister-in-law I had a crush on and had been taught, let me just try and say that sentence again. The sister-in-law I had a crush on had been taught powwow by a relative who was dead at the time. The teacher I had a crush on in high school had visions. My first love wrote poems accurately describing me since she was 12, including some significantly unlikely facts, including my first name, which is not a common one. My first wife was followed by ghosts. When we split up, the next lover was the most amazing psychic I've ever heard of, the sort who, from 1,000 miles away, would talk on the phone and describe the room I was in down to the level of detail, like an orange shirt with a pink plastic coat hanger 5 feet off to my left next to a bare light bulb. Another's father was a Rosicrucian who taught her to work with energy from a young age, and to that extent she could do things like fix a swollen abscessed tooth with a funny little motion in her fingers or give me the energy of a full night's sleep when I was cramming for exams with another. She also had this annoying thing. She wanted me to quit smoking. So when she felt I'd been indulging too much, it wasn't uncommon for lighters and matches to stop working all around me. Another had weird combinations of the stuff, and we unerringly shorted out electronics when we argued, including once, I think, a few city blocks. Some of you and Cherylee Black's experience with electronics reminded me of that. Those were some of the big things, but really the list goes on, and I was never close to a lady who didn't have some degree of strangeness. It was usually romantic, but not always, and generally only females. Though I've also met more than my share of men with that strong side to them. It never seemed the same sort of unerring degree. I wonder if you might have heard of a similar or had thoughts on possible explanations. Over the years, I've come up with all sorts of potential ones: unconscious psychic attraction, something about mutual energy similarities, some sort of higher self-guidance or odd between lives arrangements, or simply having a strange number of past life acquaintances. I'm not even sure that it's more accurate to say they were attracted to me or I was to them. I use the past tense because you could probably surmise from the examples, relationships and I don't mix well, so I've sworn them off for the remainder of this life. I don't mean that in any sort of melancholic way. I had my fill and I'm happier as a bit of a hermit, focused on the spiritual aspects of my life, and I feel sealed off from the earlier portions of it. Anyway, the effects seem to die off about then. So yeah, that is rather interesting. I'm going to let Cherylee give her thoughts first.
Oh, well, I actually don't think that's that unusual.
What's behind it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you're psychic, why wouldn't you seek out others like yourself?
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. He's saying he's not. He's never had any of this weirdness. Maybe it's just repressed in him. Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of people don't necessarily acknowledge what's there. Or they think, oh, couldn't be me. And the study hasn't been published that I've been able to find yet, but remember there was that Kit Green study that was supposed to be looking at, the caudate putamen and how, people who had like this antenna thing that made them able to interact with these unusual phenomena, that he was looking at sort of UFO experiencers and testing their brains and stuff. And what he was finding is that the spouses of people who had this also seemed to have it all the time. Can you explain that a little more? I vaguely remember that. Okay, so as Kit Green had started kind of a preliminary study of UFO experiencers, the idea supposedly was to find out if there was some kind of antenna, like some brain structure that made them
that differentiated them from other people.
Okay.
And he seemed to be finding it not only in the experiencers, but also in their spouses.
I wonder if that was always the case, or if that happens once someone got together.
Well, and see, that's, yeah, and that they don't know, but it was kind of an interesting thing that it seemed to be that, you know, that the odds of two people with the same the same structures ending up together, seeing as that they're a very small percentage of the population, seems rather odd.
Huh. Tim, any thoughts? It's a
Sorry,
ghost.
my mic was muted again.
I thought there was a ghost there talking for you.
Yeah. I'm curious, because powwow is such a region-specific thing, if this person noted where they were from.
No. They did not.
You know, my ears perked up when I heard that.
I'm sure it did.
In some sense, I guess, in subconscious ways, we tend to find our tribes, don't we? You know, and you may not even be realizing the ways in which you're finding the people that have things in common with you sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there might be an element of that, and it may be pure, isn't there a whole thing with abductees and attraction and so forth, and feeling like they were kind of lured together, like mutual abductees? Yeah. So you wonder if, there isn't an element of all of that plays into it, but also just a simple subconscious thing where like I said, you sort of find your tribe.
I mean, he had some interesting ideas in the, unconscious psychic attraction, mutual energies. And I feel like when I connect to someone, it's not because they have the same energy. It's because they have sort of an energy where the frequencies mix right, Yeah.
I always say you want to find the person whose neurosis kind of clicks with yours, not you don't want the same, you want it to fit like a cog,
Yes.
You don't want it to be the same ones, because they'll just bump up against each other.
And of course, ideas of, past lives, or even you could go as far as saying like spiritual families or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I mean, for me, most of the people, there have been so many times in my life where I've had dreams about someone who's going to be important. And it's always someone female. I don't know why that is, because it's not necessarily, a relationship type of thing. But it's, for some reason, the people that I'm most connected to are almost always female. And sometimes these dreams come years ahead of time. And it's not like a vague sort of, oh, that might have been this person. There's no way it's not that person, because I've learned to write down what information is important and kind of separate it out. It's like, okay, this is mostly dream imagery, but here's this stuff, and this stuff was actual information. And eventually I'll look back and go, yep, every single one of these things is clicked. And so I don't know what that is. Is it that I don't really have a choice, and these things are just things that are going to happen and I'm seeing them ahead of time? Or is it just that I'm following them?
Just little glimpses of what may come.
Yeah. I mean, because at this point, I usually remember them for a while. Like, I don't tend to forget them, because I'm like, okay, there's information there. And so I always, like, something happens, so I'll be like, what was that dream? No, that's not this. What was that? No, not this. And then eventually I'll be like, oh, there it is. Okay. And so it's like, that's why I've started to wonder, like, do I have free will? Like, is this my choice? Am I just playing a part here, Especially when the dreams are years ago, like it's something 2 or 3 years before it happens. And it's like, okay, it's not like it was something that was upcoming in a week. For that to be that far ahead sort of says it's pre-planned to some degree. I guess I could screw it up if I tried. I don't think I want to make that experiment and see what happens. Any thoughts, Cherylee?
No, there are so many different ways of looking at these things. Like if all time really, if time isn't linear the way we experience it, then why shouldn't you have glimpses of, maybe the future affects the past as much as the past affects the future, or
True.
maybe it affects it in limited ways. We don't know.
Or maybe there are certain pinpoint events that are going to happen.
Yeah.
And everything in between we have free will over, but we're drawn into those certain events.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel on a worldwide stage, things like 9/11 or this COVID-19 thing are events like that. Like they're supposed to happen for whatever reason, for whatever changes they're going to wrought from this. They're meant to happen for a reason.
Yeah.
It may suck.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure a lot of good things came across 9/11 happening. I mean, it seems like we lost rights and things like that as a result. But maybe this COVID-19 thing will be different. Maybe we'll have a little more respect for the people who are making minimum wage and still working for us. Who knows what the other side of this is going to look like.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope there's some kind of good that comes from it.
A little more preparation and safety nets, for the next time something like this happens. I mean, it's only a matter of time. It's one of those things. Outbreaks are going to happen. Meteor impacts are going to happen. And this is type of stuff, solar outbursts are going to happen. This is the type of stuff we should prepare for.
Although it's still weird that, liquor stores are essential, but schools aren't.
Yeah. So that's most of our stories. Couple others I got to read through a little more, but again, please send more stories at whereDidTheRoadGo.com, because we love reading them and talking about them. Never know what you're going to learn. So Tim, what do you have on store for Strange Familiars coming up?
Well, let's see. I'm working on what is bound to be multiple episodes on ghosts, but not the kind of ghosts that you're thinking of. It should be a very interesting episode.
So, not Slimer from Ghostbusters.
No.
Okay.
Not that. These are ghosts from the 1800s. Lots of accompanying articles. I know people like when I do my research. This is deep research. I'm about 1/3 of the way done, but it also relates to a episode we did a while back on a Iron Master and his ghost in Maryland named Lee Master, and it kind of ties in with that.
Okay.
And it comes out of that. So it's it's probably going to be 2 or 3 episodes of that. And then at some point we're starting our South Mountain series, which digs into the South Mountain chain here in Pennsylvania and all of the many stories we've had in that region, just one after another. So that's going to be an ongoing series. That's no end in sight, but we need to kind of get that going here sometime soon too. So that, and then more of the same. We'll be doing more weird history, more interviews, and so forth.
All right, excellent. And that all can be found where?
StrangeFamiliars.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And Cherylee is invisible.
That's right.
Is not contactable unless you really want to contact her, in which case you can shoot me a message at contact@whereDidTheRoadGo.com and I'll pass it on to her.
That's right.
All right. I thank both of you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Where Did the Road Go is made possible in part by help from our Patreons. And special thanks in particular to those Patreons pledging $10 or more: Allison Cook, Lindsay Trebet, Super Inframan, Tim, The Great Change, Stone Wilderness, Luke Osborne, Rob Drummond, Alex Whitcomb, Damian Tallman, Edu Camahort, Tactical Therapist, Janet Bunderson, 36 Dingo, Maria, the exceptionally talented Sam Sheeran, Jennifer Campbell, American Rambler, Kevin, John Rutledge Foster, Eric Citron, Andy McNamara, Matthias Sumby, Dominic O'Malley, Christopher Vaughn, Riker and Stark, Roland Belsat, Sean Cosgrove, Jose A., Roger Gonzalez, Craig Cicernos, Ray Benedetto, Linz Jackson K., Alfred Tuttle, Matthew Sproul, Kevin Schreck, Patricia Giaquinta, William Lovelace, Mark Brady, Chris646, Carla Mahoney, and James Lattimore. Thank you all so very much. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Again, send us more stories. Stories at wheredidtheroadgo.com. If there's anything else you want to contact me about, contact at wheredidtheroadgo.com is the best place to do that. And if I don't respond to you, message me again, because sometimes things get lost. I get a little overwhelmed. And it's not that I intentionally don't write people back. It's that I literally forget about them because it gets just lost in the inbox. And I apologize for that. Remember, we have merch on the page. That's wheredidtheroadgo.com. We got all kinds of stuff with 4 cool designs, 2 by Tim Renner, 2 by Jeff Ritzman. And yeah, they're really neat. And if you want to help out the show, become a patron. It's only $3 a month to get extra content. You can find the link to the Patreon at wheredidtheroadgo.com. See you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.